speech, expression, and protest. And Harry's been in the news again. Welcome, Harry. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, mate. For me, it feels like Christmas has come in November. Yesterday, I had just the best of times. I've been looking forward to having an opportunity to turn the tables on our Stasi police force, and fate handed me up the opportunity on a plate. On I think it was October the 14th, I was just busy mowing my daughter's lawn one Monday afternoon, and I got a phone call, and it turned out it was the police. And the police started talking to me about this lunatic ex-copper called PC Lindsay Watson, who was dismissed from Leicestershire Police just over a year ago because he'd had a 2-year campaign of stalking me. I mean, really quite violent stalking. He threatened to have me shot. He reported me to every terrorist organization in the UK. At one point, he said that I was running a terrorist organization with the then Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and that together we were responsible for the bombing, for a bombing that had taken place in Denver, Colorado. This is how unhinged this transgender police officer was. The thing that was quite surprising is that it took 2 years to investigate him. Whilst he was being investigated, he wasn't suspended. He continued. He continued to be a police officer, and he was stalking me on police time. Now, eventually, I got him sacked. He was sacked for gross misconduct, for running numerous fake accounts to disguise the fact that he was a police officer, and he was sacked. He was placed on the barred list. And as I understand it, he had his pension rights taken off him. So it was all very, very serious.
Right.
And it was almost a year to the day since his disciplinary sacking that I got a phone call from the police, Lincolnshire Police, wanting to talk to me about Lindsay Watson. Now, naturally, my first thought was, hey, oh, he's been stalking other people, and they want me to sort of help in the investigation and maybe give a witness statement. But then it slowly dawned on me that actually I was the subject of the investigation. And I realized this when the detective sergeant from Lincolnshire Police said, so I'd like to arrange a time for you to come in for a voluntary interview. And I said, hold on a minute, am I the suspect here? I said, you do realize this is that lunatic tranny cop who got sacked for stalking a year ago? He said, well, nevertheless, he's made a complaint, and I need you to come in for a voluntary interview. I said, right, okay. You say a voluntary interview. What happens if I tell you to bugger off and refuse to come in for a voluntary interview? Are you going to arrest me? And he said, well, it would be an option. We would have to consider arresting you. I said, well, in that case, it's not a voluntary bloody interview, is it then? It's an interview under coercion. I said, all right, then, yeah, I will come in. I'll come in today. He said, oh, I'm busy today. I said, well, I'll come in tomorrow then. He said, I'm busy tomorrow. I said, well, I'll come in the day after then. He says, no, I'm on leave. And the first date that he was able to interview me was yesterday. So I had 6 weeks thereabouts of wondering what the hell it was that I'd done. But yesterday I turned up at Lincoln Police Station with my friend, the lawyer Elliot Hammer from London, and we went in, and that's when it all kicked off.
So, I mean, it's a kind of crazy situation. We've obviously seen a lot in the press recently with Allison Pearson, Maya Forstater, even a 9-year-old, with these non-crime hate incidents that you were right at the forefront of, and we were sort of told that they were ending after your case. You kind of won that. And then in addition to that, the Prime Minister came out and said, urged, that was an interesting word, urged police chiefs to stop policing tweets and get on with dealing with police matters around burglaries and things like that. The public are really, really furious that they're not being done, and they really want them to be done. Just how, and for you to be going in yesterday with all of that happening, I mean, what was going through your head just with all of this, Harry?
What was going through my head was, thank God they've picked on me. Thank God they've picked on me, because I'm one of the few people, maybe even the only person in this country, who's got the particular background, makeup, character, knowledge to do what I did. I knew for a fact that I had not come close to committing a criminal offence. Now, when you have a clean conscience, it frees up your mind. If I thought, oh my goodness, have I gone a bit too far? What did I say? Have I tweeted out something when drunk? What could I possibly have done? But I'd asked my co-founder of Fair Cop to look through our Twitter feeds and see if there was anything that she was concerned about, and there was absolutely nothing. And that simply confirmed what I already personally knew, that I'd done nothing at all to warrant a police investigation.
Right.
So when I went in, I was told that I was being investigated under the Online Safety Act, Section 179. And Section 179 is quite interesting. It's where you publish something which you know to be false, and which you know or are reckless of the fact that it is likely to cause someone severe mental distress. And they said that this is what I had done. And I said, okay, well, will you tell me what it is precisely that I've done? They said, right, okay, you've pretended to be the Chief Constable of Leicestershire. I said, what? He said, you put out a tweet on the 27th of October, 2023, where you pretended to be the Chief Constable of Leicestershire. I said, show me the tweet. And he passed it over to me. And it says this. This was immediately following the dismissal of PC Watson from Leicestershire Police. And this is what I put. Under the Fair Cop heading, I put statement, read the dismissal of PC Watson from Leicestershire Police. And then I wrote a little bit about it. And he said, there you are. You've said that this is from Leicestershire Police. I said, are you a complete and utter moron? The statement says, statement, read the dismissal of PC Watson from Leicestershire Police. He was a police officer from Leicestershire and he's been dismissed.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's not how I read it. I read it as though you're pretending to be a chief constable. And this has caused PC Watson, ex-PC Watson, huge amounts of distress. Wow. And I said, you've got to be some special kind of idiot not to be able to read what that says. It doesn't say, this is a statement from Leicestershire Police about PC Watson. It says, this is a statement from Fair Cop about the dismissal of PC Watson from Leicestershire Police.
Yeah.
And then it gets even worse. We said, well, what date was that exactly? And he said, oh, that was on the 27th of October, 2023. And we said, right. And this is the Online Safety Act. I said, yeah. I said, right. What date did that come into force? And he said, it came into force on the 26th of October, 2023. I said, oh, that's fantastic. So very, very lucky then. You got me just in time. And then my solicitor, because we knew this was the case, my solicitor said, are you absolutely certain that the act came into effect on that date? And he said, yes. He said, are you sure? He said, yes, I've checked. Well, of course, it didn't come into effect on that date. It came into effect on the 31st of January, 2024. So even if I had tweeted pretending that I was Leicestershire Police Constable, it would still not have been a crime because it was out of date. It was before the act came into being. Wow. And this detective sergeant could not get his head around this simple fact. He swore blind that the act came into effect on the 26th of October. It did not. It came into effect the 31st of January. Couple that with the fact that the guy can clearly not read and understand syntax. There we go. So that was one thing. The other thing was I wrote an article for The Critic. Do you remember when Baby Reindeer came out on Netflix? It was very, very popular about stalking, and it resonated with me because in Baby Reindeer, the subject of the stalking had a sort of affection for his stalker. And I'd found myself that I too had a degree of affection for the officer who was stalking me. I felt sorry for him. I've spent a little bit of time since worrying about him, that he's out of work. It's quite an odd response. It's almost a Stockholm syndrome response. So I wrote about this for The Critic, and it was entitled My Police Stalker, and it came out last May. But when I tweeted that, I put, just to be clear, my stalker was a man. a man with a ponytail, but a man, not a woman. I was not stalked by a woman. And the police investigated me for that. They'd taken this article about my police stalker and said because I had said that he was a man and not a woman, that this also constituted a breach of the Online Safety Act, and that's why they needed to investigate me. And it was at this point I said, "Is this the best that you've got? Because if you ain't got anything better than this, then you are in deep shit, sunshine." And he said, "Well, you've given me your explanations." He said, "I'm now going to conclude the interview and turn the tape off." I said, "Hold on at 1 minute. I said, "You leave that little tape recording alone because I've got something that I want to say." And he looked at me and said, "Oh, what's that?" I said, "Under PACE section 24A, I am enacting the right to arrest you for an indictable offence. That indictable offence being the 1997 Protection from Harassment Act, Section 4, where you have harassed me with threats of violence." And he went, "You can't do that." I said, "I just did. I've just arrested you." He says, "Well, I'm not arrested." I said, "You are arrested." And he got up to leave the room, and I got up and stood at the door and said, "You're arrested. I'm not going to touch you, but you are now under arrest." He says, "You can't. I've not threatened you with anything." I said, "Yes, you have. You told me that if I didn't come in for this interview, that you would consider arresting me. An arrest is a violent act. It involves handcuffing somebody. It involves confining somebody. It involves imprisoning somebody. It involves controlling where they go and what they say and whom they speak to. So your threat of violence was part and parcel of the harassment, and therefore it's an indictable offence, and therefore under PACE section 24A, I have the right to arrest you, and I am arresting you, and I now demand that I take you to the custody sergeant so that he can process you." And he looked at me and said, "No way are we going deeper into this police station." I said, "Well, I don't give a shit because you're under arrest." I said, "You better get some officers down here." Anyway, he said, "Well, we'll go to reception." Like an idiot, he went to reception where there's the public. And I had to tell the receptionist that I'd arrested the detective sergeant, and would she be so kind as to fetch some police officers in order to process him. So four police officers turned up. Amazing, isn't it? You can't get a police officer when there's a burglary, but you go and sort of arrest the detective sergeant. Suddenly, you've got four on the spot there and then. They looked to me absolutely gone out. They'd never seen anything like it in their life, and they said, "You have no grounds for arrest." I said, "Yeah, I do. He threatened me with violence." And they said, "No, he didn't. He said that he would only consider arresting you." I said, "Right, I'll put it this way, shall I? If I say to you," when I looked at the sergeant, this other sergeant who was there, and I looked at them and said, "If I say to you that unless you accede to my demands to meet me to a certain time and place and answer my questions, I am considering the option of smacking you in the mouth. Would you consider that to be an offence?" He said, "No, you can't say that." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because that's the threat." I said, "It's exactly the same threat. It's exactly the same threat. Do you not understand? It's the same threat." And they said, "No, it's not. It's not. Well, one of the things that we have to consider is arrest." I says, "No, you don't. You do not have to consider arresting somebody any more than I have a right to consider smacking somebody in the mouth without due cause." I said, "So I demand that you process this detective sergeant in the same way that you would process me if he'd arrested me." And they said, "Well, we're not going to do that." And I said, "Well, of course you're not going to do that, because it's one rule for you and another rule for us." He said, "If you've got a complaint, what I suggest you do is write in and complain about the procedure." I said, "There you go. This is not about procedure. This is about two-tier policing. This is about, there is one rule for the public, and you can arrest or threaten to arrest who the hell you like on the basis of whatever. But when the tables are turned on you, you suddenly don't like it. You don't like having it stuffed up, you dear. You've hidden your police sergeant. You've told him to run away into the thing, and you're going to do nothing about it." And I just said, "You're an absolute joke." And then I waved them tatty bye and left the police station. So that was that.
So I mean, people can see the video. We'll do links to the videos. You've got them at We Are Fair Cop as well, of video of you doing some of this, some of the audio. And Rob, I think we can get that put in the thread for people subsequently as well. But let's just take this bit by bit because there's a number of things all going on here, Harry. Firstly, I think you're right. I mean, because of your particular experiences, because you've been a police officer, because you know the law, because you've been a campaigner, and you know, also, I think, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of police officers, a lot of the rank and file, are not happy about some of this stuff at the moment. And they're kind of having to do some things. And also, they don't necessarily, not all of them understand all of these bits if they're put under pressure. Like they may like do something. So I want to get from you what you think's going on in this particular situation. Is it that they are just doing this kind of ideological two-tier policing and they're doing this stuff around EDI, around being allegedly transphobia? Or is it when they get a report in, or if they get a complaint from someone, I mean, why did they call you? Why are they pursuing? Do they have to, if someone comes in and says something arbitrary, like someone's wearing a blue t-shirt, the police don't have to contact someone else, right? And there has to be some sense that there's been a crime done. So that's the first point. There has to be. And so on what basis?
Let me just stress that bit, that bit, Alan. This is precisely what I said. I said that why did he interview me on this? Well, he had to. A complaint was made, and I said, but I've just made a complaint, and you're refusing to interview him. So you are making an arbitrary decision, based on who's making the complaint and who the complaint is about. If it's about me, then you have to investigate me, and you have to consider the option of arresting me if I don't accede to every one of your demands. But when I make a complaint about the detective sergeant, and I've got an even stronger basis than he has, you simply dismiss it and say, we don't need to do anything. We can choose not to do anything. We do not honor the arrest. We do not recognize your right to arrest him. We don't recognize the evidence. Go away and turn it into a civil complaint. So that is part of the problem. The police are arbitrarily giving themselves a pass on the same basis that where they would arrest or threaten to arrest or give out a non-crime hate incident or otherwise harass a member of the public. Now, one of the things that makes this very, very clear is, remember the non-crime hate incidents. A non-crime hate incident was supposed to be recorded against any individual who had said something that didn't quite amount to being a crime, but which was nevertheless perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hate.
Yeah. And
as a result, something like 250,000 citizens of the UK were given non-crime hate incidents by various police forces between 2014 and 2019. Fair Cop FOI'd the Met Police and said, how many non-crime hate incidents have been recorded against your police officers during that time? And the answer came back 0. Absolutely not a single one. That proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is two-tier policing, that at least the Met are applying one rule to the public and another to themselves. We FOI'd every other police force, and the number of non-crime hate incidents recorded against police officers is either 0 or utterly negligible, because they give themselves a pass. The law or the principles or the procedures or the ideologies which are visited upon the public are not applied without fear and without favour to their own officers. That is a tragedy. That is documented. That is empirical evidence. We can prove it. This is two-tier policing, and that's what's going on.
So just on that point then, I mean, the argument would be, and we've seen a lot of cases, and people could have a separate conversation about this, to what extent there is widespread racism or there is not in the police, there is widespread sexism or is there not in the police, and all of these things. But your point is that when there's a law in the land for everyone, but these incidents are being pursued not in a way that's universal to everyone. So because there are many people might say, well, actually, this police officer has done this non-crime hate incident, or if some of their colleagues might see it, but they're not going to apply it. That's the point you're making about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the question, it was based between 2014 and 2019.
Yeah.
It was based purely on perception. There did not need to be any evidence of hate at all. other than somebody's perception. Now, if you do a quick Google of Met Police accused of racism or Met Police accused of disabilityism between 2014 and 2019, you will come across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reports. Every single one of those, if it was not dealt with as a crime, must have been recorded as a non-crime hate incident because somebody clearly perceived that their actions were motivated by hate.
Yeah.
And they weren't recorded. They gave themselves a pass.
Right.
That's the point I'm making.
Absolutely. So, and then though, just bring us up to speed with what was meant to have, what we all understood had happened or had not happened with these Orwellian, Kafkaesque sounding non-crime hate incidents. I mean, you know, in itself, that kind of term that's really problematic anyway. But where had we got to? Where did you think we had got to after, for instance, the case you had? Was it with Northumberland, please?
No, it was against the college. It was homicide police.
College of Police. Yeah,
the College of Policing.
Homicide and College of Policing. Sorry.
So the High Court and the Court of Appeal said that not in every case is a non-crime hate instance unlawful, and we never argued that anyway. Occasionally, there will be somebody who is not quite at the threshold of criminality, but nevertheless, the police need to have a strong interest in them, and they need to record that data. That's fine. That's straightforward intelligence. But that's not what was happening. What the police were doing was recording anybody for anything at all. If somebody said, "Oh, I've got a hurty feeling about that." What the Court of Appeal said that type of recording was unlawful because it breached Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights, and it created a chilling effect upon free speech. Now, this is not opinion that can be dismissed. This is the highest court in the land, or the second highest court in the land. It applies across the entire nation. In fact, it applies across Europe because it was European. It was a European Article 10 that was being judged in our court. What the police chose to do was to ignore it. And so what Suella Braverman did as Home Secretary, when she realised it was being ignored, she turned it into statutory guidance to make it absolutely crystal clear that the recording of non-crime hate incidents in the most part was an unlawful activity. That should have been the end of it. Yet nevertheless, the police continued to record non-crime hate incidents. And then when we had a change of government this summer, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, came out and actively encouraged the police to continue and increase the recording of non-crime hate incidents. The basis for that was she saw it as a conservative policy that needed overturning, when in actual fact it was nothing to do with the conservative policy. The policy was based on the ruling of the Court of Appeal. So the Home Secretary does not have the right to simply announce that she is overturning the ruling by the Court of Appeal. But then nevertheless, that's what she did. And that's why Toby Young, the Free Speech Union and Fair Cop have written to the Home Secretary seeking urgent clarification and threatening her with High Court action.
And so when you can imagine from the police's point of view, I mean, I wonder who made that decision at Lincolnshire, but I mean, from the police's point of view, this is all a bit confusing. Police on the ground and then police chiefs. Maybe the police chiefs are more kind of simpatico, more happy to go along with the ideological thing based on what's been going on at Hendon and etc. Maybe some of their own views. But how do you just see this? I mean, what's the position of the police when people are making these allegations or saying these things, and how, you know, the Home Office, Yvette Cooper, etc., and how this is all playing out? How do you see it?
Well, there was the police are obliged to take into consideration an allegation, but what they then need to do is measure it against objective evidence and against the law. If you don't have evidence that can match the breaking of a specific law, you have no case, there is no investigation, and that is the end of it. And that's what should have happened in this case. This lunatic ex-tranny copper has put in, as chances are, put in a complaint, and it's landed. It's landed. A detective sergeant has gone, "Oh, this looks interesting. I'm going to have a go at this." And he hasn't done his homework. He simply has not done his homework. He's got the law wrong. He's got the tweet wrong. He's got absolutely everything wrong, which would be forgivable if that was simply a telephone conversation. You know, he'd interrupted my gardening and we had a telephone conversation and I put him straight.
Yeah.
When I am required to go into a voluntary interview under threat of arrest and confinement, then it takes on an entirely new, sinister tone. And so my sympathy for that police officer is somewhat south of zero. And my sympathy for all those officers who came to his rescue is somewhat south of zero. And it's the same for the chief constable and the PCC. I have no sympathy with them whatsoever. You know, they don't do their job. They can't do their job. They are remiss about doing their job. They are negligent. And I'll say it, they're also malicious. It's as simple as that. I think this was a malicious act because I am who I am. This was an attack upon Harry Miller of Faircop because of what I do. It is that straightforward.
Wow. So you think basically what you're saying is that someone there made a decision because of your campaigning work around free speech and around addressing these particular issues to try and make an example of you, to try and scare you, to try and quieten you, shut you down, a bit like we've seen them. It looks like what's been going on with Allison Pearson and Maya Forstater and even 9-year-olds in the playground when they're saying things. So that is really serious. That's like going after someone specifically because they want to uphold and defend what many of us think are the fundamental pillars, one of the fundamental pillars that our forefathers fought and died for free speech and free expression. You think that they're actually going after you for that. That's very sinister.
Well, one thing I am absolutely certain is that the former police officer, Lindsay Watson, was most definitely going after me. And whether he found a useful idiot or a complicit ex-colleague, I'm not entirely certain. But nevertheless, the net result is exactly the same. This ex-police officer managed to co-opt another police officer into his campaign of harassment against me, a campaign which has gone on now for almost 3 years. Shocking. This is a former police officer who, whilst he was a serving officer, bearing in mind he's a former soldier called Alex Horwood, he said that, and I quote, "I've won more gold on the Rangers than you've got in your rotten teeth." Now, when he's talking about ranges, he's not talking about the golfing range. He's talking about the firing range. And then he said, "People like me need culling." I remember my wife and I spending one Saturday night with the curtains shut in our own home because he tweeted that anti-terrorist police were on the way to my house to have me arrested. And this was shortly after he'd said that he was coming after me with a gun. This was a police officer, a serving police officer. And I got him fired. By the way, the CPS refused to prosecute him because they said that 850 tweets sent directly to me, threatening me with absolutely everything, didn't actually constitute a criminal offence. Can you believe that? Yeah, absolutely. But not only that,
when you actually had this stalker who's threatening to come and do real absolute violence very explicitly, that does not constitute something that needs to be prosecuted or investigated fully in that way. But that's just astonishing, right? You know, because the examples always use, if you give a direct threat, if you say, "I'm going to come and do this thing," not "wouldn't it be good if people did it?" or "I hope that thing happens." But if you say, "I'm going to do this," or you try and pay someone to do it, that's explicitly breaking. That's not a free speech discussion. That's saying that's a statement of what you're going to do, of an intent. It's just, this is the thing about the two-tier policing. When someone goes to prison for shouting at a dog or for shouting at or for being on a protest, and we should remember that a few people did violent acts and arson, and there are laws about that, right? And they should be met. But there's a whole lot of people who went on protests and a whole lot of people who didn't, who have all sorts of thoughts and should be able to discuss and debate them. And yet we've seen people imprisoned for some of that, whilst other convicted felons have come out. What is that all about? When you get a tweet like that, that's really like quite frightening. Obviously, I know you're very resilient and robust, but for your family, for you, and then to think that the CPS would say that that's not something to pursue, I mean, it boggles the mind.
Yeah, it does. I mean, one of the other things that he did, apart from anything else, he was operating a fake We Are Fair Cop account called We Are Flow Cop and We Are Failed Cop. So he was doing that. But see this tattoo on my arm, it says the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he found a picture of that. He doctored it so that it read the guy that beats women and
Wow.
published it. Yeah. Back in 2 years ago, I had the great honor of speaking at the Old Bailey with the former director of public prosecution. And that's a very special occasion, of course, because very few people are invited to the Old Bailey to give a
Yeah.
talk like that. Normally, if you're at the Old Bailey, like you know, it's because you've done something wrong.
Yes.
I hadn't. I was invited to give a talk, so it was a proud moment for me. And I took some friends and my wife down there, and this beautiful, beautiful hallway there at the top of the staircase. And I took a photograph. My wife looked absolutely lovely, and I posted it on social media. Within 24 hours, PC Lindsay Watson had taken the photograph, doctored the photograph, reimagined it with me as the Joker, and then zoomed in on my wife's feet. I mean, I'm getting angry just thinking about it, and said what it is about these six-toed inbreeds, gender criticals.
Gee.
Right? The CPS had that, and they said nothing to see here. So naturally, I tweeted and said, if you come anywhere near my family, I will knock 7 bells of shit out of you and drag you by whatever ball sack you've got left underneath that skirt of yours to the nearest police station. Now, I said that because I'm trying to protect my family. I'd gone down the legitimate means of reporting him to the police. I'd submitted entire files, and the police had said nothing and kept him on duty. So what are you left with at that point, Alan? What are you left with? You know, you come at me all you like, take the piss out of me all you like, but you come after my wife, you come after my family, you start doing that. If I find you, I'm going to fucking kill you. It's that simple. It's that which is in us. But I don't want to do that. I want the police to do their job.
Yeah.
And at the very least, sack him immediately. At the very least, suspend him immediately, and then bloody prosecute him. They did none of it. Why? Because I'm Harry Miller, a fair cop.
It's just incredible. I mean, and I really recommend everyone read that article at The Critic. It was both funny and terrifying. I mean, you got a good sense of humor, Harry, and you're a big guy and you can look after yourself. You've obviously trained physically and that type of thing. But this whole thing where people think it's okay to pursue people in the private sphere with their families, go down to their houses or make lots of threats. It's part of a cancel culture thing, but it's a whole kind of idea that you don't win the hearts and minds. You don't argue things out forthright in the public. You can't necessarily, you don't believe that you can convince people with your ideas. So instead, you try and hunt and horn anonymously, in a cowardly fashion. He's not coming out and saying, let's have a straightener or I'll meet you around the corner. He's doing this thing that's really nasty and pernicious, going after your family, saying these things, these threats, using different identities on social media and elsewhere to pursue you. If you spell that out in the article, this kind of. And I think that this is another thing that's really concerning. It's part of the free speech discussion, right? And expression that we should have really robust. We should be able to discuss things and say things that people find really reprehensible, not nice, not pleasant jokes, but that we thrash them out in public, honestly. But we don't then take that to the private sphere, to people's homes, to people's partners and spouses. We don't go after them in their jobs. We have it in the whole thing about having a strong public sphere where we act in public, but then we can have a strong private sphere where we can go and have our privacy and our home. These things are essential. And when we start breaking those down and blending them all, which is, there's an attack on that as well. It's part of the free speech attack. And people start pursuing people in their private sphere with their families. It's a complete degrading. It's also very dangerous and understandably, Harry, and I think many people will share this view. People will defend their families and the things that they feel so passionate about. This is why this is so dangerous, this situation where, people think, well, hold on a minute. Are the police actually going to defend and protect the things that the law says we should, and families and people that are law-abiding citizens? Or are they going to become weaponized? Is the judiciary, CPS, is it going to become weaponized to implement something that is ideological, something that is only about certain types of things, certain types of complaints, certain types of people. I mean, that is very worrying and dangerous, isn't it?
It's incredible. It's incredibly dangerous. Let's never forget that a police officer represents the armed wing of the state. They have access to your records. They can PNC you. They can find out everything about you. They've got handcuffs. They've got tasers. They've got the very least an extendable baton. They've got the capacity to cause you all kinds of trouble. And when I first identified this officer back in, I think it was February 2022. And I identified him because he was calling the LGB Alliance terrorists. And I thought, this can't be right. And he said he was a Leicestershire police officer. So I wrote to Leicestershire to confirm that he was their officer and to put a complaint in. You know what they did? They told him to continue his campaign if he wanted, but to use anonymous accounts so that they wouldn't be embarrassed.
Wow.
That's what they said. That came out in his disciplinary. That came out in the emails that had been sent to him by his senior officers. Not don't stop harassing Harry Miller and other gender critical women. If you're going to harass them and stalk them, make sure that you hide your identity so that we can't be associated with it. That is absolute fact. We heard the email. Astonishing. This is state-sponsored terrorism against members of the public. That's what it is.
Now, what?
His crime was to get caught.
Yeah. So what is just unpick that a little bit more. What's happening there? This is senior police officers that are saying, crack on, we don't really care. It's like, this is the point, your point, that if it was without fear or favor, or if there is harassment, or if there's a law and these things are breaking laws, right? Are they not? Is it not the case that it's a law, or is it not a law? I mean, partly there are allegations that he's making against you, but there are things that are certainly on the verge of, calling someone a terrorist actually has direct consequences for them, right? I mean,
okay, when you're a police officer, now it's fine if you just happen to say, "Oh, you're a bloody terrorist" in a Twitter chat, that's fine. But when you send 850 direct messages to somebody in the space of 18 months, and those direct messages are copied into the counter-terrorist police, various chief constables, repeatedly alleging that I am a terrorist, that I am responsible for this murder and that murder, and I'm running this terrorist cell, and that my high court victory was based on perjury, and that he has the evidence for that, and it's going to be very soon before I'm dragged before the court and my ruling is going to be overturned. When he said that when I was involved with the Reclaim Party that I was fiddling the books, when he says that when I was with the Reclaim Party I used bribery and extortion against all other members of the public, and the police were going to investigate me against that. This is not Twitter banter. This is not a bit of tit for tat. This is not going no in the playground. This is somebody making very serious allegations, and these allegations would be serious, whoever made them. But when it's a serving police officer tagging in other serving police officers, then it becomes a conspiracy, as far as I'm concerned. And when the police know about it and their response is keep doing it, just go under deep cover so that they don't realize it's you, that is absolutely a conspiracy. And it's because I had the capacity to out him, I employed a private detective to get his address. I then dressed up in funny gear and pretended that I was a postman to confirm his address. Once I'd got him absolutely cornered and there was no way out, that was his crime. It was getting found out. Then, of course, he was sacked, and that was that. And he's continued his campaign using other SOC accounts, and he's eventually landed lucky and found a detective sergeant who was willing to follow up his insane rantings and threatened to arrest me. And that's what happened yesterday.
I want to talk. We could talk about this guy a little bit more, but just what's happening with police officers, senior police officers? Is it that this new ideology that we've seen, like when people talk about sex-based rights, transgender campaigning activists, this kind of EDI that has been institutionalized equality, diversity, inclusion that's in many public sector and private companies now across the board. What is it with these senior officers? Like, how has it become the case that all this can happen to you and it can be demonstrable? Okay, he's been fired from the police officer. Is there nothing beyond that that can be? Why is it that there's nothing there that's beyond that? Secondly, he's continuing this. And what does that mean? But firstly, what's going on with these senior officers? What's your view on it?
Okay, I think following the McPherson report in, when was it, 1999,
Yeah.
I think there has been some degree of collective guilt amongst police officers, and those police officers who've climbed the slippery pole and now become senior police officers are the ones who were most affected by a lot of that guilt. I think that guilt was entirely unreasonable. It was, there was a problem with the Met. It needed putting right. But that does not give you the excuse then to embrace every woke ideology just to show and demonstrate and signal that you've put some distance between now and your past. And it certainly is inappropriate when you take out your corporate angst on members of the public in order to demonstrate how changed and how pure you are. That's what's happened. The other thing that's happened is that the 2000 Police Reform Act changed the oath of attestation that every police officer takes. Prior to 2002, the oath said that you would keep the sovereign's peace and you would, to the best of your ability, uphold the law. Since 2002, it's keep the sovereign's peace, uphold the law, and uphold human rights. So now we have the police who are tasked with doing multiple things. The law is no longer the single locus of control. It's the law and human rights. So if you're Amnesty International, or if you're Stonewall, or if you're Mermaids, or if you're Black Lives Matter, or if you are an eco-warrior, and you say that this campaign is a human right, then the temptation of the police is to adopt it as though it was the law and to uphold it, because that's what they want to do, or uphold human rights. But again, they pick and choose which human rights to uphold. If I say it is my human right to carry a gun based on the Second Amendment, they're not going to uphold that human right at all. But if I say it's my human right to, or it's a person's human right to use preferred pronouns, then they go, oh, yeah, that sounds right. We'll uphold that. And they treat it as law. They treat it as though it were law. And this is the thing. If they know it's not quite the law, and therefore they're not going to be able to prosecute, they do the next best thing, which treat it as a non-crime hate incident, which has pretty much the same effect. It scares the bejesus out of the member of the public. It makes them feel like a criminal. It affects their chances of a job because it's revealable on an enhanced DBS check. And to all extents and purposes, all practical purposes, you have a criminal record. And that, I think, is where the problem lies. We don't need the police to be upholding human rights. We need the police to be upholding the law, a single locus of control.
Absolutely. Well, I think it was from the start of the year till June, it was 13,200 non-crime hate incidents. As you say, they then go against people's names when people are doing checks on them or whatever. Sometimes they know about them, they don't know about them, as well as this broader issue about who is being investigated, who's being policed. We've seen who's been prosecuted for what reasons. We've seen during the lockdowns and the so-called COVID inquiry, which is pretty moribund, right? Not fit for purpose. But we've seen that there were spy units sent out to people, part of the DCMS, the Rapid Response Unit. We've now got the Counter Disinformation Unit being bolstered by this current government. We were told that it was going away, but that's been bolstered, spying on journalists, doctors, citizens. We also have a thing that's worrying as well. I mean, on the one hand, people are making these allegations all the time, right? So you go to the farmers' protest that we were at, and someone was posting that they thought some people were racist because of like where they were standing, and they just allege it, right? And then another person says, oh, where's all the escape routes for the ambulances? This person who was posting that, by the way, has been promoting certain types of protests for the last 2 years, for the last year in the streets, right? He happened to be promoting some of the Palestine protests. I think the thing is, you get, and then alleging that this is therefore racist and all of that, and it's also putting people in danger and safety. People use these things, but it seems like the police and some others at the moment are very susceptible to listening to things that ideologically are of a certain order, right? This is what people mean by two-tier policing, right? People are getting arrested, people are getting put in prison for saying certain things, going on certain marches. How do you see? I mean, this is something for all of us, and we're all talking together and we're all arguing back against it. We're putting pressure on MPs and we're talking to the government and saying so. Keir Starmer did say he's going to urge his police officers to stop doing some of this. We need to go further, don't we? We need to get it dispensed with. We need to make sure that the public are all insisting on this and that it stops. What's your thoughts on it, Harry? How we...
The police cannot be trusted with non-crime hate incidents. It's as simple as that. They had a potential good use, and they've completely and utterly destroyed any credibility that they could have had. So they need to drop them immediately and forever. Now, it's all well and good, Keir Starmer, suddenly jumping on the bandwagon of police our streets, not our tweets. But let's not forget, he is the one who demonized an entire section of the British public following the Singapore riots. His Home Secretary, who would have known that the killer of those girls had an Al-Qaeda manifesto in the house, and that he was intimately linked with promoting Islamic terrorism. She would have known on the day that that was the case. Yet nevertheless, she stood before Parliament and said that this was misinformation. And Starmer and her encouraged police officers to do an almighty crackdown on anybody who dared protest. Anybody that dared protest. And they then instructed the judiciary to fast track them through the system and bang them up for as long as humanly possible. So when Keir Starmer suddenly sticks his fingers in the air and goes, oh, the wind has turned, I just don't believe a word he says. Don't tell me, show me. Get a hold of that police service and show me that you are making a difference. Because the rest of it, it's all BS.
So that's very important, because the other thing that we saw was that, where are we allowed to speculate in society? Are we allowed to say, oh, several children and some adults stabbed at a little playgroup? That doesn't sound like a normal type of crime in Britain. That sounds like the type of crime or attack that we've seen in certain very particular incidents, like we've seen in things like London Bridge, like we've seen on some army officers, where absolutely, or we've seen on citizens, and to even speculate, people are getting in trouble, they're getting pursued, they're getting hunted down effectively. Yet it's okay, it seems, for Keir and Yvette Cooper and others to speculate that anyone who's asking questions, anyone who's got a problem with a question of borders or with migration or with who's doing what, it's right for them to speculate that everybody is a far right person, or that everybody is potentially going to be doing some kind of terrorism. It's speculating that everyone's going to be dangerous. And this whole approach, this attitude, this two-tier approach, which, the chief of the Met, who's effectively the chief of the police, Mark Rowland, said you're not allowed to talk about two-tier policing. And, you just think, God, it's just incredible, right? What are you going to do? You're not going to address the issue. You're going to address the fact that people are talking about the issue. Goes to the heart of the problem. We know that our members and supporters, but as well as many, majority of the British public, they're fed up with not being able to get the police to be able to police the streets and around their homes when there's attacks, when there's burglaries, when there's shoplifting and people aren't coming, they don't even call them. But yeah, there's this approach, right? You can criminalize and weaponize the public if they speculate, if they ask questions, if they disagree. This is really dangerous, and we're really encouraging everyone to come out and defend free speech together, to support it. I think you're right. Keir should do that. The question is he going to? And how can we make sure that this stops, Harry, from your point of view?
Well, I don't think it is going to happen. I think in Keir Starmer's heart, he remains a prosecutor. It is his instinct, his professional instinct, to prosecute people. And to prosecute people, you have to, if you're going to prosecute them successfully, you have to cast them as evil. Not just their act is evil, but their motivation's evil. And I think he's brought that to the great state, the great office of Prime Minister. So I think this does not bode well at all. Not at all. But if he wanted to get to grips with it, one of the things that he would have to do is address, for instance, the Chief Constable of Northumbria, Vanessa Jardine. I walked alongside her in disguise just a few weeks ago at a Pride march. She didn't know it was me, otherwise she would have changed her tune. But she was marching right behind the pro-Palestinians who were singing "Free, Free Palestine." They were waving their Palestinian flags. Now, that's not me imagining two-tier policing. That's not us imagining that the police are marching with pro-Palestinian flag wavers. That actually happened. I've got it on film. She was part of the same march.
Right.
So
Can I just clarify? She was there as a citizen.
No, she was there in uniform.
Right.
She was there in uniform with other officers in uniform because it was the Pride March.
Yeah.
And in front of her were a bunch of pro-Palestinians waving their flags, singing, from the Gaza, from the river to the sea, Gaza will be free, and all that sort of stuff. She was part of the same march. Can you imagine if she'd marched alongside a bunch of white working class people waving England flags and demanding that our borders be shut? She'd have been out of a job by the end of the day. But because it was Palestine and because it was, happy clappy pride, she gets a pass. She gets a pass because that kind of two-tier policing is absolutely fine. But the other sort isn't. Our old male, stale, orthodox, heterosexual, or even straightforward gay. Because now being gay is equivalent to being an orthodox right-wing Christian, because unless you embrace the LGB and the T, then you are a literal fascist. So those of us who hold orthodox views, as far as Keir Starmer is concerned, as far as Yvette Cooper is concerned, and as far as many chief constables are concerned, we are the wrong sort. And if they cannot criminalise us, they will non-crime criminalise us. That's the way it is. I see no hope at all in the very near future. I do see hope in the moderate, in the middling future.
Yeah.
Because this is nonsense. This is ahistoric. It's anti-reality. It's not how British people are. It's not how human beings are. And eventually this too will fall. But it's going to be one hell of a mess between now and then. And I think we're in more pain.
Yeah, I think the thing is that more and more people are getting vocal about this. And I think that what's just happened in America will also is making a difference on things. It's if you see the kind of, let's call it a populist, but a public-oriented mixture, very huge mixture of people that's got involved with the Trump campaign, everyone from Tulsi Gabbard to, Robert Kennedy Jr. You've got a range of different, come from different backgrounds, different perspectives. The fact that, people are talking to people like Jay Bhattacharya, it's been a real change from where we've just seen, where a lot of people were demonized, censored, shut down. And actually, the American public have said, we don't want to be treated like that. We want to have the key core ingredients. Of course, the economy is central to that, but freedom of speech with Elon Musk. It's clear that the idea that we are allowed to speak freely, that we're able to speak freely as citizens of a free society, paramount. We have no freedoms without that. I think it's really essential for us to take note that can change. It has changed in America, and the signal that's sent internationally, and also from our own experience of campaigning, yours from the campaigns that you've won, and we owe you a debt of gratitude for having the bravery and the commitment and the passion and the the energy to do that. But other groups as well that we're all friends with, Free Speech Union and Us for Them, and many others that are fighting. But we are all going to work together and embrace this with the public, with citizens, and to push back against this and to say we're going to speak freely, we're going to organise, we're going to protest. We just saw that, you couldn't make it up really, but, it won't surprise some people that the BBC Verify used a Labour activist stats to counteract the argument that 70,000 family farms would be affected by the new inheritance tax that Rachel Reeves has put through. And he was saying, well, it's less than 500. It turns out he's a campaigner. He's been a campaigner for Labour. And BBC Verify uses that. And then they changed it on the site and sort of tried to go a bit, keep it a little bit on the down low. But, you just think, right, Marianna Spring and BBC Verify, and they present themselves as this thing against misinformation. And yet they end up, it looks like, being a mouthpiece for both the Treasury and a Labour activist by citing that as examples. And you think it's hardly surprising people are distrustful and cynical. But I think what's really important is that you've demonstrated this, and well done to you, Harry. I've got to say, I think because some people get very, very scared, right? Understandably, you get the police calling them or telling them, and then it gets dropped. No further action, it's dropped, but the damage has already been done. We're saying, make sure if anything like this is coming your way now, do let us all know. We all need to stand together. I think this should stand as an example, certainly there in this incident at Lincolnshire Police, but more broadly, the police chiefs, the Home Office, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. It's very dangerous doing all of this stuff, and we need to sort of take stock. But we're all going to I say it's dangerous weaponizing this and making citizens be in this situation. But we need to all stand our ground and keep reminding everyone about our paramount rights to free speech. This is going to go out straight away, Harry, but I want to thank you very much for doing this and your continued work. And I think we should, as we said at August, carry on working together, do some more initiatives where we can keep pushing back on this and getting a situation a bit more like we've seen in America, where the public is front and center and policing without fear or favor is, because I'm convinced there are many, many police officers that think that as well, apart from anything else.
Well, I tell you what, I remember, not at this conference because I wasn't there, but last year's conference, I stood with you and there was a big picture of my face behind us. And I said, what I want is every chief constable in the country to see that face and shit themselves. And I stand by that. And I do it not for me. I do it because I represent the great British public. And I'm that person who just isn't scared. And I need to make, and we working together, we need to make police constables, chief constables, PCCs, recognize that they are servants of the crown, not servants of the state. And it's their job to uphold the law. And if they don't uphold the law and they allow themselves to become operatives of the state, then there is a group who's going to be there and that's going to be resisting. And at the moment, the face of that resistance is me.
Harry Miller, thank you very much. Here's to being the face of the resistance. We'll be sharing all of this along with links. Do have a look at some of the tags, because we're tagging in the Home Office, Yvette Cooper, police chiefs and others, and make sure they all hear from you as well. We'll be doing more on this. Remember, we're always stronger and we're better when we're together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.